Comte Positivism, Sociology and Technocracy, or How Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff can and have saved all the humans in the world. Our story begins on October the 17th in the city of Paris, France, when a one Claude Henri de Rouvroy Comte de Saint-Simon was born into this world as a French aristocrat. Henry's grandfather's cousin had been the Duke of Saint-Simon. This restless French aristocrat believed that the American Revolution signaled a new beginning, a new era. He served under General Washington and fought with Marquis de Lafayette between 1779 and 1783 and was taken prisoner by the British. After he was released, he went to school to study engineering, but when the French Revolution began in 1789, Saint-Simon quickly joined, endorsing the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity. During the Revolution's early years, Saint-Simon wanted to build a scientific school of improvement, but did not have the money. The revolution became unstable, and the Reign of Terror began. It was at this time that Saint-Simon and a clergyman bought the Cathedral of Notre Dame and stripped the roof of its metal and sold that metal for scrap money. Saint-Simon was then arrested on suspicion of engaging in counter-revolutionary activities. At the end of the Reign of Terror, he was released from prison, rich from the depreciation of the currency, but that fortune was later stolen by his business partner. From that day on, Saint-Simon devoted himself to political studies and established a polytechnic school in 1794. In 1817, Saint-Simon wrote the treatise L'Industrie, which propounded his new socialist views, which were later developed in his book L'Organisateur, 1819. Throughout his writing career, Saint-Simon was struggling financially. On March 9, 1823, Saint-Simon attempted to take his own life and shot himself in the head 6 times, blinding himself but not killing himself. What caused the American and French revolutionist Claude Henri de Rouvroy Comte de Saint-Simon to turn from endorsing liberty and freedom to propounding socialist views? If we can discover that, then we can unlock the mindset of those that somehow believe they can outgrow freedom, as if liberty and Santa Claus were on the same level. In 1817, Saint-Simon published a manifesto called the Declaration of Principles. In his title work, L'Industrie, the Declaration is about the principles of an ideology called industrialism, which is about calling for the creation of an industrial society led by people within what he defines as the industrial class, which includes all people engaged in productive work that contribute to society. Emphasized were the scientists and industrialists. Saint-Simon said that the industrial class needed to be concerned about the threat of the idling class. The idling class were those that preferred to be parasitic and benefit from the labor of others, while seeking to do no work themselves. He wrote that the principal economic roles of government were to ensure the productive activities in the economy were unhindered, and to reduce idleness in society. Saint-Simon believed that the expansion of government beyond those 2 principal economic roles would cause the government to become a tyrannical enemy of industry, and that the economy would decline under such intervention. Because of this, Saint-Simon stressed the requirements of merit and a need of a hierarchy of merit in society and in the economy, having scientists in charge of decision-making in government. Let us take a moment to reflect on what we just learned about Claude Henri de Rouvroy Comte de Saint-Simon. First, a deep breath. From whose perspective shall we examine in our analysis of Saint-Simon? Perhaps if we were to ask certain libertarians, conservatives, and objectivists, they would see an American revolutionary that wanted a small government that supported the industrial class, or they would see that Saint-Simon is a crony and a social engineer that wants to become a dictator. If you were to ask certain liberals and leftists, however, I am certain that many would see a man of privilege using his class power to enforce laws that force people to work and benefit only a few of the industrialists, while others would see the birth of a utopia where science is king and liberties can be removed if it means more equality. All the above perspectives would be somewhat correct about Saint-Simon, as Saint-Simon wanted what Plato wanted. You see, if you were to ask a proper objectivist philosopher, they would tell you that what Saint-Simon wants is to have philosopher kings. However, the philosophers have been replaced with scientists. This is what I want you to reflect on the most. Pause the video if you must and ponder this for a moment. Saint-Simon is like a missing link between most of the political philosophies today. He wants social control. He wants small government. He wants hard work and industrial giants. He wants low taxes. He wants to replace human rights with collective rights in order to force everyone to work. Saint-Simon advocated for a form of technocratic socialism. And he wanted all of this before communism was born. In fact, it was Saint-Simon that inspired Karl Marx. But more importantly to this video, he inspired his student, Isidore Marie Auguste François Xavier Comte. Auguste Comte was a French philosopher and writer who formulated the doctrine of positivism. The goal of positivism was to remedy the disorder that was caused by the French Revolution. Comte believed that social order and society in general could be studied like the natural sciences, which is the basis of positivism. Comte, like his mentor Henri de Saint-Simon, believed in the idea that the ruling class should be scientists. Here I want to draw some attention to modern-day political beliefs and issues or memes. Today there are many conservatives and/or, quote, conspiracy theorists, unquote, which believe that there are people conspiring to create a new world order, which is controlled by a technocracy of scientists and social engineers. Some conservatives, objectivists, and leftists will laugh at those people, but the truth is that they have a reason to be concerned. This technocratic socialist ideal has existed since Saint-Simon and was taken up by Comte, and later by Emile Durkheim, who will create the science of sociology with that idea. The ideas that we are seeing in front of our eyes today is the push for a technocratic socialism where we, quote, trust the science, unquote. The science being whatever those at the top of the, quote, meritocracy, unquote, deem to be, quote, science, unquote, this week. Follow the science, they tell you. These mandates are for the collective good. Your rights are meaningless if the collective is in danger, according to those that want you to follow the science. Those highly resistant to conspiracy theories may be ready to comment down below about the alternative. What, you want a society run by idiots that don't know anything and have never contributed to society? Clearly, this is not the argument a rational person would be making in claiming that there is a conspiracy theory to create a new world order. However, most people that do recognize that there are in fact people conspiring to take over the world are not themselves rational, which is not unlike their political opposition. And they do tend to reject all science and technology because of this. This is why conspiracy theorists come across as anti-science. I would say that most are not anti-scientific method. They are just weary of new science that they themselves cannot validate. And they do have factual knowledge of one group of scientists that are not using real science in order to control the globe. So, in recognition of the fact that there are people like followers of Comte, people that want to create a new world order technocracy, those conspiracy theorists become fearful of all science. And things like flat Earth grows. So interestingly, the more people conspiring to take over the world invoke science, the larger flat Earth groups will likely grow. To get an idea of why objectivists should be concerned with the works of Comte and the impact his work made, we need to look at Comte's account of social evolution. Comte believed that there are 3 stages of social evolution. The first stage is the theological stage, where man's explanations for things around him came from a god. The second stage, according to Comte, is the metaphysical stage. The metaphysical stage is the stage where man's explanations for the things around him came from philosophy. The final stage, according to Comte, is the scientific or positive state, where man's explanations come from science. Comte believed that to get from one stage to the next, the old society would have to be completely destroyed before a new society could be built. Comte also believed that the society must be destroyed and replaced at the same time, or else the destruction would leave a void for anarchy to grow. So traditional values need to be chipped away and replaced. This is a fear you hear from conservatives, that their religious views are being chipped away and replaced with secular, science-adjacent ideas. To some objectivists, this might sound good. Out with religion, in with a society based on science. However, it is the metaphysical stage that objectivists need to concern themselves with. Comte and his followers hold that scientific principles will replace philosophical principles such as universal rights. According to Comte and his followers, things like human rights are philosophical ideas that are social vestigial parts that evolved from our need of God to define ethics, and that we do not need it now that we know that humans are animals that exist of electrical impulses and hormones. According to Comte, things like morality are meaningless in the universe, in that there is no morality as you cannot see it like you can see the science of neurology. Neurology will never prove morality, and therefore the Society of Science would construct a society where the government works with the economic industries to create drugs that make a productive labor force for the common good. A society where the laws are based on scientific truths that don't rely on philosophical principles would mean a society where truth can change from day to day by a vote of scientific men. Why does this all sound so familiar? Well, the followers of Auguste Comte include Emile Durkheim, who took these ideas from Comte and used them to create the academic branch of sociology. Sociology being the science of society, which is entirely based on the idea that we are transitioning into the scientific stage and must study society like we study psychology, biology, chemistry, and physics. By studying it like the others, sociologists will be able to discover the science that allows them to remove human rights for collective rights, meaning removing individuality in order to create a new world order where sociologists can construct the perfect utopia. Durkheim held that he would be able to discover the inherent nature of society. Durkheim assumed that man was inherently egotistical, and that it was the collective consciousness that controlled the moral basis of everyone. He believed that moral individualism was a cult mindset, that the belief in one's rights was a carryover of one's belief in God's rights. Durkheim's contribution to sociology is called structural functionalism, or just functionalism, including such terms as social facts, those being patterned ways of acting, thinking, and feeling that exist outside of any one individual, but exerted by social control over all people. Another major contributor to sociology is Karl Marx, with his branch being called conflict theory. Marx, inspired from Saint-Simon and Comte, held many of the same ideas as those two. However, there were slight differences, different approaches to the same basic belief. The work of Comte and his followers caused the birth of logical positivism, which came from the Vienna Circle, a group of scientists from the University of Vienna between 1924 and 1936, including such members as Richard von Mises, Kurt Gödel, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and Karl Popper. The logical positivists hold, like Comte, that philosophers were just making things up, and that moral philosophy based on the works of those before, during, and directly after the Industrial Revolution were based on the old theological stages. That those philosophers created their philosophies without evidence, most requiring God at some stage. For this reason, the positivists reject philosophy and embrace empiricism. So let's sum up what we have so far. Plato created the idea of philosopher kings. Saint-Simon adopted the idea of philosopher kings as industrial kings in a technocratic socialist utopia. Comte used Saint-Simon's work to form the 3 stages of social development, where he believed that man would one day outgrow the belief that we are gifts from God and realize that we have no such thing as universal rights, and then we will be ready for the new society of collective rights over individual rights. Durkheim took this idea that science doesn't need philosophy to create what he believed to be a branch of science called sociology. Karl Marx also added to the body of sociology with his theories. The universities of today are teaching sociology as if it was a science, which it is not, and the results are showing all over the place. The argument that we must follow the science as dictated by scientists like Bill Gates, who is a college dropout and has no medical degree, while advocating that 2 + 2 can equal 5 if you drop the philosophical principles created by one culture. The university students that come out of school with these ideas have been brainwashed by the social engineering of Saint-Simon, Comte, Durkheim, and Marx. These students have only really been taught one major lie. The rest of the brainwashing is self-imposed after believing this one lie. The lie is that philosophy cannot be verified like the natural sciences can. This is where Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff come in to save the whole of mankind. Saint-Simon, Comte, Durkheim, Marx, and the Vienna Circle, and all of their followers, were correct in their analysis of the past philosophers. Those writing before, during, and just after the boom of the Industrial Revolution were not grounding their secular philosophies of morality and ethics, metaphysics and epistemology in reality very consistently. They all noted that Adam Smith was onto something in regard to liberty, but no solid arguments were being made as to why individual liberties is universal or natural. Liberty was God-given, and these men had rightfully moved past their notion that God exists. Since no philosopher before them ever produced a theory that could be explained as validly as the science of light and optics or chemistry, those men assumed that there could be no philosophy that would ever be as valid as the natural sciences. Most of these men did not have the pleasure of knowing the works of Ayn Rand, and it was the lack of having a philosophy like hers which created the destructive societies of the 20th century to which Ayn Rand was born into and subsequently escaped. The objectivist philosophy of Ayn Rand does what Saint-Simon and Comte and Durkheim wanted from a philosophy, a method of reducing abstract philosophical concepts down to concrete sensory data. Ayn Rand's metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and political philosophies are inductively and scientifically provable as required by philosophers like Comte. Comte believed in something that is similar to Ayn Rand's spiral theory of integration, that being a circular dependence of theory and observation, that being the scientific method. The circular theory starts with inductive observation, which leads to generalizations, which leads to theories, which leads to hypotheses which are observed, which leads to more generalizations. However, Comte and most philosophers believed in what is called the problem of induction. Without induction, the circular dependence of theory and observation must start with theory, like God exists, which is then tested and so on. Leonard Peikoff, using Ayn Rand's theory of concept formation and the rest of objectivism, concluded the work required to put Plato, Saint-Simon, Comte, Durkheim, Marx, and the Vienna Circle, and sociology to bed once and for all. To quote Peikoff in the lectures in which he saved the world, quote, "To solve the problem of deduction, one must grasp that A is A, which is Aristotle's monumental achievement. But to solve the problem of induction, one must grasp another monumental achievement, Ayn Rand's theory of concepts, and now at last we have it." In the lectures called Induction in Physics and Philosophy, Leonard Peikoff does two major things to the work of Comte and others. First, he proves that, quote, since philosophy is that which defines and validates a scientific method, and which therefore guides and validates the science of physics, no inductions made by a physicist can ever be better off than the inductions which led to the principles of philosophy and especially epistemology, end quote. Meaning that you cannot have science without philosophy, like sociologists claim. And second, he proves that, quote, philosophy is just as scientific as physics, just as inductive, just as hard-headed and factual, just as objective, inescapable, and absolute. The proper methods and standards of thought, the virtues and values leading to human survival on a desert island or in society, the criteria of great art and literature, these are laws and facts as ruthlessly scientific as the laws of Newton or Maxwell. The technocratic takeover of the globe into a new world order was based entirely on the idea that philosophy is not as valid as science, a statement which makes no sense, as science requires philosophy to be valid. The destructive philosophies and societies around the world are the result of men and women believing that philosophy is meaningless and unscientific. In place of a philosophy to protect them, the masses have only the philosopher kings to rule over them. Kings that make decisions using the word science while denying the basic facts of arithmetic. All these concerns have already been solved by Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff. We just need to show everyone that now. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the little bell notification, and if you're so inclined, support us at patreon.com/youexist.